The medieval dungeon was more than stone and darkness. It was an arena of invention, a laboratory where pain was refined and engineered. Every device, every method, told a story, not only of suffering, but of the society that devised it. Behind the cruelty was logic, to terrify, to silence, to enforce obedience. The boot. Among the most feared methods was the boot. At first glance, it seemed unremarkable, wooden or iron casings that encased the victim's legs. Yet once in place, wedges were hammered between the boot and the flesh. With each strike, bones splintered, muscle pulped, blood pooled. Victims often fainted from the agony, only to be revived for further blows. In some regions, iron boots were heated until glowing, transforming the instrument into a furnace for the legs. The boot was popular in Scotland and France, its cruelty matched only by its effectiveness in reducing the strongest prisoner to pleas of guilt. The saw. Execution by sawing was as gruesome as it was symbolic. The condemned were hung upside down by their ankles, their body inverted so that blood flowed to the brain, keeping them conscious. Then, with deliberate slowness, a saw was drawn between their legs, cutting upward. Death was not swift. In some accounts, the victim remained alive until the blade reached the chest. Sawing was reserved for crimes considered particularly heinous, murder, treason, or blasphemy. The method was both torture and execution, designed to horrify all who witnessed it. Boiling. Boiling alive was another punishment used across Europe, particularly in times of paranoia and unrest. A cauldron of water, oil, or even molten lead became the stage. Victims were lowered in, sometimes all at once, sometimes gradually, prolonging their agony. In 1531, under the reign of King Henry VIII of England, a law decreed that poisoners should be executed by boiling. Witnesses wrote of screams echoing across the square, the stench of burning flesh mingling with the cries of the crowd. Flaying. Few punishments carried the horror of flaying. The skin, the body's largest organ, was peeled away, inch by inch, exposing raw muscle and nerves. Victims rarely survived long, but the process itself symbolized the stripping away of humanity. In some cases, the flayed skin was displayed publicly, nailed to doors or walls as a warning. The act was not only a death sentence but a spectacle of dehumanization. The garrote. In Spain, the garrote became both torture and execution. The condemned was seated, their neck clasped in an iron collar. A screw mechanism tightened, crushing the windpipe or breaking the neck. Sometimes spikes were added, piercing the throat as the screw turned. Though often fatal, the garrote could be prolonged, tightening slowly, drawing out the final moments of life. It became a standard tool of the Spanish Inquisition, efficient yet terrifying. Water torture. Water, too, was weaponized. In one method, cloth was forced into the victim's mouth, and water poured upon it. The gag expanded, choking the victim, simulating drowning. Each breath became a desperate struggle, panic as lethal as pain. In another form, drops of water fell upon the same spot of the victim's head for hours, even days. The relentless tapping drove some into madness, the mind unraveling under monotony and anticipation. The Catherine wheel. Sometimes confused with the breaking wheel, the Catherine wheel was both a symbol of martyrdom and an instrument of death. Victims were tied to a large spoked wheel, then beaten until bones shattered. In some cases, the body was woven through the spokes, bent into unnatural shapes, left to rot in the open air. Its name derived from Saint Catherine of Alexandria, who, according to legend, was condemned to the wheel but miraculously survived. The device thus became both feared and infamous, a reminder of cruelty wrapped in the shroud of religion. The Scavenger's Daughter. In Tudor England, the rack had a cruel twin. While the rack stretched the body, the scavenger's daughter compressed it. The victim was forced into a crouched position, iron hoops clamping them tight, pressing the chest into the thighs, the head into the knees. Circulation failed, ribs cracked, blood vessels burst. Prisoners often emerged broken not by stretching, but by crushing. The device was used in the Tower of London, a reminder that pain could be inflicted by both expansion and compression. The collar of torture. Iron collars studded with spikes were locked around the victim's neck. Every movement drove the points deeper into flesh. Sleep was nearly impossible, and days could pass before death came from exhaustion, infection, or blood loss. The collar was not just physical torment, it was psychological. Victims were trapped in a prison they carried upon their own body. The chair of interrogation. Different from the iron chair, the interrogation chair was covered with spikes, hundreds of them, piercing but not killing. Straps forced the victim to sit motionless, each breath pressing the body deeper into the points. Sometimes heat was applied beneath, intensifying the torment. Prisoners often broke quickly under the chair's relentless pressure. Its horror lay in its simplicity. To sit became to suffer. The press. Known also as peine forte et dure, pressing was a form of judicial torture in England. Heavy stones or weights were piled upon the victim's chest. Breathing became impossible, ribs fractured, organs crushed. Death was inevitable, but not immediate. Some prisoners chose silence, refusing to plead in court, enduring the press as a final act of defiance. Yet even their courage could not withstand the weight of stone upon flesh. Witch trials and torture. In the late Middle Ages, fear of witchcraft swept across Europe. Accusations spread like fire, and torture became the means to extract confessions. Women were stripped, searched for the devil's mark, pricked with needles to test their pain. Sleep deprivation left them delirious, confessing to impossible crimes. The most infamous of all was the trial by water. The accused were bound and cast into rivers. If they floated, it was proof of witchcraft. If they drowned, innocence was confirmed, though too late to save their life. These tortures were as much about fear as justice. They silenced the accused and reinforced the authority of church and state, turning superstition into a weapon. Public execution and the theater of pain. Torture was not always hidden in dungeons. In many towns, it was a public performance. Executions drew crowds, markets paused, children and elders alike gathered to watch. Pain became theater. The condemned might be hanged, drawn, and quartered, the body dragged by horses, disemboweled while still alive, the heart torn from the chest, the corpse divided and displayed across the kingdom. Such acts were designed not only to kill, but to etch terror into the memory of all who witnessed. The legacy of medieval torture. These methods, stretching, crushing, burning, piercing, were more than cruelty. They were instruments of control, the physical embodiment of fear. Yet they also reveal something deeper about the medieval world, its anxieties, its obsessions with sin, guilt, and power. To modern eyes, they seem barbaric. Yet in their own time, they were sanctioned, even celebrated. They were seen not as brutality, but as justice. And so the instruments remain, preserved in museums, etched in chronicles, whispered in legends. They remind us of the cost of unchecked power, and the human capacity to turn ingenuity into suffering. The dungeon may be empty now, the fires long extinguished. But the echoes of screams, the shadows of the rack, the memory of the wheel, these still linger, silent warnings from a darker age. As the Middle Ages drew to a close, the theater of torture slowly began to fade. With the rise of the Reformation, the Enlightenment, and modern legal systems, the idea that pain could serve as justice was increasingly questioned. Confessions extracted under agony were no longer seen as reliable. The concept of human dignity, fragile but persistent, began to take root. Yet the shadow of torture did not vanish overnight. In many parts of Europe, such methods remained in use well into the 18th century. But as thinkers like Voltaire and Beccaria challenged the necessity of cruelty, legal reforms followed. Torture was outlawed, punishments grew less brutal, and the spectacle of pain slowly disappeared from public life. Still, the images lingered, the silhouette of the rack, the smell of heated iron, the cries of bodies breaking in public squares. They endure not only as historical records but also as warnings, reminders of how far human cruelty can go when sanctioned by faith or law. Today, torture is prohibited by international law, condemned by governments and societies alike. And yet, in hidden prisons, in secret wars, it still exists. The legacy of the Middle Ages is not entirely gone. It whispers that power will always be tempted to use pain as its most direct weapon. That is why these medieval devices, forged in iron and blood, remain important. They are not just relics of history, but lessons in morality. They ask us, what will people do in the name of order, of faith, of security? And more importantly, how will we answer, in our own time? In the end, these stories of racks and wheels, flames and chains, remind us of a truth both dark and necessary. The cruelest inventions of humanity can become warnings for the future, if only we choose to remember them. For to forget them is to risk repeating them.